Short-term thinking and the credibility gap. The challenge with political apathy or amateurism is that those who fall into either category generally maintain some superficial awareness and engagement in the political process. Those who still vote largely restrict their activities to the voting booth. The effect is that those who superficially participate become trained to think in short 2 to 4 year cycles, much like research that has shown that the maximum attention span of the TV generation became synchronized with the duration of programming between commercial breaks. Many of those who are superficially engaged in the political process have had their cycles of commitment synchronized to the election cycles. In their minds, if something isn't achieved within the time frame of 1 or 2 election cycles, then it is a total failure and is completely dead. Often they look at the first defeat or setback as fatal, and it is, at least where their support is concerned. However, those who are most connected to a political community and who are politically engaged seem immune. Because of this, a sizable number of TEXIT supporters, through this conditioning and as a byproduct of their atomization and prolonged political apathy, contend with this challenge. Some point to a lack of major success in advancing TEXIT as the real issue. Yet one can look at some of the aforementioned examples of modern independence movements and see how this short-term thinking is really a failure in personal mindset and perspective. Scotland sought independence for 800 years. The Scottish National Party was formed in 1934, and the party didn't win its first seat in Parliament until 1945. It didn't win an electoral mandate until 2007. It followed with an independence referendum 7 years later. The UK Independence Party started pushing for a Brexit referendum in 1993, with the Labour Party first pushing for the same referendum in 1974. It was finally held in 2016. The modern political movement for the independence of Catalonia traces its roots back to 1922, yet it wouldn't see a formal referendum on the issue until 2017. In sharp contrast, the modern movement for Texas independence can trace its roots back to 1996, with the TNM not seeing the light of day until 2005. The TNM's first legislative and political successes didn't even start until 8 years later. In comparison to these recently successful examples from around the world, the modern movement for TEXIT is in its infancy. Much like the other impediments, this type of short-term thinking has real-world consequences on advancing TEXIT. Lacking proper perspective, TEXIT supporters plagued by short-term thinking are prone to discouragement. This discouragement leads to one of 2 distinct actions. Either the discouraged fall prey to those who promise a shortcut, or they return to their previous status as politically inert. Many well-intentioned supporters fall victim to the purveyors of the quicker, faster, better sales pitch. Texans want their grievances with the federal government addressed as quickly as possible. Those that identify TEXIT as the best solution want Texas independence to happen sooner rather than later. After all, if there is a way that it can be done faster and better, anyone would be a fool to ignore the possibility. However, if you couple this with political amateurism, it becomes too common for Pied Pipers to lead TEXIT supporters into deeper discouragement. This has not gone unnoticed by the political class, which is quick to use it to their advantage for short-term political gain. Rick Perry, after playing coy with the issue of TEXIT in 2009, utterly failed to protect Texas from federal overreach as the governor of Texas. Instead of using his position to champion a vote on TEXIT, he wrote a book and is now a member of Trump's cabinet as the head of a federal department he loudly declared should be abolished. Greg Abbott seems destined to follow in Perry's footsteps. As Attorney General, Abbott's strategy in battling federal overreach could be condensed to tweet, sue, lose, repeat. As Attorney General, he scuttled talks between then Lieutenant Governor David Dewhurst, representatives from the TNM, and his office, because his primary concern was his impending campaign for governor and his fear of how it would look. Now that he's governor, he no longer has the power to sue the federal government, thereby streamlining his strategy to tweet and repeat. However, he did take a note from Perry's book, now using the phrase of, "if Texas was its own country," to elicit applause. Even as these two high-profile politicians publicly pandered to TEXIT supporters and privately derailed their efforts, there were many who vested all their hopes for a quick TEXIT into these two men and were let down. These two are just some of the high-profile examples. Over the years, TEXIT supporters have been pitched every form of quick fix for the Union or faster path to independence. Whether it's the latest political messiah running for federal office who is promising this time will be different, to the newest political fads like get out of our house or convention of the states, they've all been more hype than hope and doomed to failure. The growth of social media has amplified this phenomenon, especially when it comes to TEXIT. Anyone with 15 minutes and minimal computer skills can set up a page or group on social media, cobble together 15 or 20 followers, and declare themselves the voice of Texas independence, thereby creating additional noise that those who are seeking real answers and solutions related to TEXIT find increasingly harder to sift through. The damage to the cause of TEXIT cannot be overstated. In an era where social media makes it difficult to tell real news from news generated by a Russian troll farm, the hit to credibility can be, and often is, massive and worldwide in a matter of minutes. Occasionally, some of these online actors attempt to make the jump into the real world, declaring themselves an organization or running for office under the independence banner. Things take a turn from annoyance to farce. Some of these organizations actually make an attempt to appear credible. One such organization floated some of the most ridiculous ideas ever presented in an attempt to address serious concerns that Texas have with TEXIT. Promoted as plans, these ideas more closely resembled below-average junior high civics projects than well-thought-out policy positions. For example, one such plank of their allegedly well-thought-out and well-researched plan proposed transferring desalinated water from the Gulf of Mexico through oil pipelines back to West Texas, declaring that it was perfectly feasible and safe because oil and water don't mix. Another small collection of malcontents, who are best known for getting arrested for pretending to be government officials and ostensibly advocates for an independent Texas, recently made a very negative statement about the Catholic faith. Congratulations, guys. You just alienated approximately 20% of Texans directly and over half of Texans who consider themselves religious indirectly. Not only that, you tied it directly to the cause of Texas independence. The point is not to ridicule these folks. It's to highlight the fact that even with the damage they cause and their obvious inability to ever get Texas out of a failing union, some people, beset by short-term thinking, view them as a viable alternative to the mainstream TEXIT movement. In doing so, they represent a disruptive and fragmenting force that creates serious credibility issues for TEXIT among those who are undecided, even causing some that were for independence to throw their hands up in disgust and give up on the idea entirely. Getting and maintaining credibility is extremely important for TEXIT to advance. For every action that robs it of credibility, it takes a dozen more to regain it. The effort of losing credibility plays out predictably. When credibility becomes shaky, people who would otherwise be inclined to support TEXIT or, at a minimum, entertain the notion, lose hope that it can be done. This affects the number of true believers, which affects the amount of money people put into TEXIT. With no money, it becomes impossible to become a serious player at the ballot box, which is reflected in a TEXIT-averse legislature. A TEXIT-averse legislature means a leadership in the legislature that will stop at nothing to prevent Texans from having a referendum on this issue. This leads to frustrated pro-TEXIT supporters who then fall prey to the Pied Pipers who promise a way to do it quicker and better. So the cycle goes. For TEXIT to advance in a timely manner, TEXIT supporters will have to adopt a more long-term, forward-thinking, disciplined, and discerning approach.